Hello, I'm Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my vlog, where it's both my mission and my pleasure to highlight my creative journey in hopes of inspiring you, giving you specific takeaway, all that way your journey can be at least a little bit easier. Now, it's been a while since I really dove into things and provide an update, and I plan to kind of go over all the various things. Life has been full of its ups and downs in various ways. And, it just was easier to do shorter lessons than, sit down and really kind of talk about everything that's kind of been going on. But I will provide you with everything. So let's start with the creative stuff, right? It's just been a busy time. Last weekend, there was the Ultra Music Festival down in Miami, which is a big EDM concert type of thing. And, the Grammys went and covered it, and I stayed behind it here in Los Angeles to, edit the various interviews and create like a recap package for all of it. And so that was like an all weekend thing. Now, of course, for me, as is the case with various people that I know, it's like that's job one of several, right? So now, like that in and of itself is quite an undertaking. All in, it was from like Friday all the way to Monday in terms of my involvement in creating stuff. The majority fell of it on Saturday and Sunday. However, all the same, collectively ended up being 30 videos. Now, yes, as far as I'm counting the videos, because people ask me that know the work, it's not 30 different necessarily edits. It's 15, but you have to create a horizontal version and then a vertical version, which doesn't seem that difficult, but it still adds time because how things are framed in a horizontal version of an edit, which is what people ask me all the time, how I kind of, do this stuff, right? The ones that are like editors themselves and the nitty gritty. I remember my friend Jonathan Moulton, he asked me how my approach to it, because, people have different approaches. Sometimes like for my own stuff that I put out, right? Like I'm doing right now, if it's short enough to post as a TikTok or Instagram reel, I may do that, but I do that as a vertical video where for me, what I'll do is I'll take the horizontal video and just let it live in the center of the frame of the now vertical frame. And then what I'll do is I'll make another layer underneath it of that same video, expand it out so that way it covers the whole vertical aspect ratio. And then I add a blur to it, desaturate it. So it's, it's kind of got that entertainment news style feel. Sometimes they, video that used to be vertical, like when it ends up on celebrity news shows or just news shows in general, they'll kind of do the reverse of that so that way it fills out the sides of the horizontal screen, right? And that's my approach generally for the stuff that I do. And sometimes I apply that technique for edits for others when it makes sense. Sometimes, I have to like reframe everything and just have the thing blow up entirely in that vertical frame. So it adds work, all that to say, right? So that's why I count, even though it's like 15 individual edits, you still have to reframe, those videos into vertical and spend time making sure that it looks good, as opposed to like, just applying one sort of filter or something like that. Anyway, I know that got into the nitty gritty of it all, but I figured some of you might be curious to know that, because certainly even this weekend, someone I know, they were making stuff for TikTok and so forth, and they were asking me how to repurpose old horizontal videos, right? So I was able to help them out, and that's exactly the explanation I gave them. Anyway, the other aspect of everything is, as far as side stuff. I'm working with a new client that we're going to have a long-term relationship with, and part of it was onboarding them. So like with anything really, and I'll talk about this longer later when I talk about kind of my finances and stuff like that, and really cleaning up things with that. But really it's about organization, right? The organization in most things is going to be the first step, and it's going to be the longest step. But if you can get yourself organized, in this case, with the new client, it was all about, okay, what are their expectations of the workflow, and what assets do they already have, what are they missing, okay, and how we're going to work together, and what's the expectations on both parties' end, yada yada yada, right? And so that doesn't seem to move things forward in terms of like, oh wait, can I hear an edit, or can I see this, or whatever the case may be, like. But all the same, by solidifying that stuff, it makes everything smoother moving forward. But it is time consuming, and so a lot of time went into that in particularly. So just kind of getting that off to its start. And also part of it for me was I wanted to make sure before I took on everything with this, because it is an ongoing thing, that I had contingencies in place should there be weeks that I couldn't do it, or whatever the case may be, right? And so, luckily it worked out. In fact, even this first week that, I have someone on board that's going to essentially be like a partner in all of this with me, instead of me just working on the show individually, I'm essentially going to split it with someone I know. And so that way, they're taking on half the workload, I'm taking on half the workload, and there's times that he's going to be busy, then I'll take on that share, and vice versa, right? So that way, and as long as there's good communication up front, then it's easy. And that's, again, part of what I wanted to make sure was set up correctly, so that way, that was accounted for, right? And now it is. And so, all things considered, it should be fairly smooth sailing moving forward. So, yeah, I'm excited to have that be the case, and excited to be moving forward in this way. It's going to be exciting. This Monday, a second episode comes out that my friend and I have worked on, so it's we're already kind of hitting that stride, so to speak. And the interesting part about this one in particular too, part of caught us off guard, because we were talking about initially getting started in May, and then all of a sudden they were like, actually can we start next week? And I was like, whoa, okay, this is okay, yeah, I mean, I guess that's doable. Like, if that's what it has to be, we'll figure it out. And so, while thrown into a loop, we did make it work. And so, onward and upward in terms of that. This past Friday, I finished up the first act of my script for The Arbiters. So if you're unfamiliar, The Arbiters is the latest movie project that I'm working on. It is my third movie that I'm attempting to make. It's aimed as an animated film in the style of the old Studio Ghibli movies, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, or even like the old school great movies like Akira, and so forth, right? So I love that style, and I feel it fits really nicely with the story that I'm trying to tell. And The Arbiters is planned as a trilogy. I want it to be a trilogy, no different than Lord of the Rings, The Matrix, the original Star Wars, and so forth. I think it, the scale and scope of what I want to show and say dictates that. Now, that's kind of been the difficult part in all of this. I've been working on the outline for this. You can call it a treatment if you want. It's, the latest outline of it is like literally 20 pages long, essentially. But the hard part has been to create a satisfying ending, because you want it to, it's one of those things, I know that there's going to be, aspects of it that are going to be open-ended, but you still want it to be satisfying enough as a movie. So it's not, like, in the ideal world, it would stand alone, like The Matrix, yet allow for more things to come after it. But I think, I don't know, it hasn't quite been that way yet. And it's interesting, watching the Lord of the Rings behind-the-scenes features. Elijah Wood talks about it, where some people, when they saw the original Fellowship of the Ring, they were like, wait, what kind of an ending was that? And he was like, well, don't worry, like, it continues, it goes on. And I kind of have that gut feeling, with the people that I work with. I'm like, well, it's going to go on. And they're like, we know that, obviously, but, it's a big risk, because certainly, at least with like Lord of the Rings, when the Peter Jackson movies got made, that was a known property, right? At that point, it's obviously based off of very, very successful books. Mine is a completely new thing, not based off of anything. So it's that kind of finessing, but all the same, the version of the outline that currently exists, I spoke with John Comerford, and he was like, you know what, like, at this point, we need to start to get closer to understanding the characters. You need to start hearing their voices in your head and so forth, and the only way to do that is to start writing. Like, so the outline itself is, we know it's not perfect, but there's enough there to then explore in the writing of the script and fix those changes, and I agreed with him. And so this past Friday, as I was mentioning, I finished up the first act of The Arbiters. So right now it's about literally 30 pages, which is actually pretty good, So assuming that the movie's roughly 2 hours, you want your act one break to come in around 30 minutes in, and when you write a script, 30 pages, each page equals about a minute of screen time. So, that's pretty good. Usually when you write a first draft, it becomes overly written and so forth. And I'm sure there's parts of it that are overly written, and I'm also sure that there's parts of it that are underwritten. But I'm not going, like, with this one, I'm not going for perfection at all. It's just like, let's finesse the outline and start to see what's actually happening beat by beat, line of dialogue by line of dialogue, line of action by line of action, and so forth. So that way we can, address the issues that exist, because now we have the context and the specificity. And so that's been fun, to kind of continue that. And, I'm going to meet with John to go over that and kind of see what's what's working, what can be finessed, and he'll, the way we've worked in the past, he'll take a stab at, the revision, and I'll kind of overall continue moving forward. So my goal is there's about 60 scenes, as outlined in the out. I was in trouble from the moment I opened up my mouth with that sentence. There's 60 scenes outlined in the outline, right? And so Act 1 happens at around, scene 18. And my goal is to, this coming week, write 19 through 25, which might not sound like a lot, but these are very pivotal scenes. There's something that happened that's not quite a cliffhanger, but it's a little bit cliffhangery. It's like a shocker. It's like, wait, what's going on here? And so now, multiple parties are kind of coming together, and we're kind of starting now getting an exploration of, okay, what is this? We're going to start to answer some questions, right? No different than, when Neo in the Matrix, he enters the real world, he finds himself in that pod, then he's dumped into the sewer, and then they, pick him out, and then he starts to get the answers of what is the Matrix, right? So it's kind of that aspect of it, and those types of scenes are the ones that I'm going to be working on in this coming week. That is the goal. So that's exciting to write. Still, we'll see. May 25th is the Austin Film Festival deadline, and it would be great to get to submit a script to them, as part of their screenwriting competition. Now, I'm pretty sure I can have a script written by that deadline. How viable it is in terms of readability and, is it any good? That remains to be another question. So if in and of itself, I don't feel like it's there, then I won't submit. But as of now, that is sort of my guiding light to try to move myself forward in all of this. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And I'm excited to hear what John thinks of these first pages. Obviously, I know, his thoughts on the outline, but now we'll see how his vision of, what he thought was in the outline changes now that there's the context of everything. And even through this process, there's been a couple of aspects that I've changed as I've dug into it, right? So, certain things will, I'm sure, be surprises. Hopefully it's because it's elevated, right? Versus like, okay, wow, this doesn't really work. I see where you're going for here, but no, right? So we'll see all that. And through this whole thing, I'm continuing to work with the animators to create the character designs. I just got, some round of characters drawn recently, and went through a set of notes on both of them. One is now approved, or approved. When I say approved in this sense, it's like, this is a good representation. This is like close enough, and once the script is fully written, then we'll revisit this character and see, now that we have the full scope of how things fit, we can address it, and the animators themselves will be able to better see. Because right now, they're kind of just working off of my initial notes when I did the character bios and so forth, which even through the outline, each character has been affected, and therefore, as they give me stuff, I'm being like, oh, okay, I see why you did this. That's that note longer applies because we've updated it in terms of the story. And so, in fact, here's what we're going for. So they're having to kind of, make the changes and, kind of react as best as they can, off of like a constantly evolving thing, which is normal, So I'm excited for that. And, overall there's like 9 main characters in this. So far we've got 4 quote unquote locked in, and then working on the other 5, and then there's some creature design that we have to make, because even though they're not the main characters, they themselves are part of all of it. So it's exciting to kind of continue to see this come to fruition, and one sort of builds on the other. That's the beautiful thing, the outline, the script, and their designs as they come in. The designs help me visualize the characters, which helps me with the story, which then helps with the designs. And as new characters get created, it's like, oh, okay, because this character and this character interact so heavily, and maybe they're in opposition. It'd be great if this character had this sort of design, which then juxtaposes this design or whatever else, right? Like that's the overall goal. And once we have more of this in place, right, we'll be able to bring that to its full capacity. And that's the beautiful aspect of this. you know, throughout the whole process. And that's why, you know, I said we're not going to spend as much time worrying about locking everything in 100%, because of course it's going to change. Like, we're so early on, we're like literally in the development process. We don't even not have a draft one of the script, you know, and for me, like, when I say draft one, it's like just purely like just get the ideas onto the page, and then I like to do a polish or two of it, and then that becomes like, okay, here's like the official first draft, right? Because, you know, that like just putting words onto the page initially for me, it's not that it's not coherent, but it very much is, like, as I said, just navigating your way through it all and seeing it, right? And certainly, you know, a first draft, that's what it's kind of designed. Like, first drafts will inevitably go through many, many changes, but all the same, you know, at least there's a somewhat of a flow to them, one would hope, you know. So we'll see how it all kind of ends up being. The exciting part as well with all of this is that, you know, this whole project not only is a film project, but I want to do it within the Web3 space. So I want to have an NFT component to it. And it's something that I've been working on with my friend AJ Jolivet. And, you know, recently I had sent him proof of concept that I made for this thing called In Search of Sunrise, which was initially intended as a movie, as a sci-fi movie, but given the ambition and scope, you know, I thought it would be easier at this stage of my life to turn it into a book, right? And so that is what I'm doing at the moment. But anyway, and I'll talk about that shortly. But all the same, the proof of concept itself, right? You know, it's about 4 minutes. And so, you know, we've listened to various podcasts about filmmakers utilizing NFTs, and, you know, some of them primarily take like frames and mint those as the images that become collectibles, right? And so, you know, AJ was like, okay, well, send me that, and let me just go through the process, and, you know, we'll see how it kind of turns out. Now, we haven't launched this yet. You know, he just wanted to go through the process of creating, you know, getting these stills. And then he's like, okay, cool. You know, I'm able to understand the process now. So give me, you know, let's pick a few images and let's like go through the minting process and you know, take that step forward. So that's kind of where we're at. I sent him back some frames that I thought were, you know, ones that, like, you know, one would want to blow up and frame, right? Like, that's the idea, you know. And so we're going through that process. And it's fun to continue to, you know, learn more and more about this space. You know, this space is ever evolving, which is something that I'll talk about as well in this episode. But just in terms of the arbiters itself, that's kind of where we're at in the process, right? Now, speaking of scripts and developing projects, so my friend Jeff Graham, who is the director of Always Lola, you know, he's a fellow filmmaker. This guy, you know, cranked out already a first draft of a new project, right? And that's very exciting. Now, you know, the project doesn't involve as much lore building necessarily as what I've been trying to do, but all the same, you know, kudos to him, you know, for getting that out. That's amazing. And what's fun is, you know, I had a chance to read it, right? He sent it to me for feedback. No different than, you know, he's really excited to read my first draft as well of the Arbiters. You know, he's one that doesn't love to read outlines because he does better when he can actually read the script. So I'm excited to finally be able to get him a script whenever that may be. Regardless, the point being, you know, I had a chance to read this script, and it was fun, and I think, I think there's a lot of things that he did well, but like all things, it goes back to even just when I was doing my outline, like you recognize whatever notes you give, it's because you're excited for the potential of it, right? Like that's the notes I was receiving from people, and they were giving it to me because what I wanted wasn't hitting in the way as was intended. And so, for me with Jeff, I read this thing and really enjoyed it. And the notes that I was able to give him, I was like, I see where you're going. Part of how I give notes is I also ask a lot of questions. And, so I can get to understand of like, what are you going for here, right? And how can I help find a solution for that if that's not coming across clearly? And, like with all first drafts, this was what I was hinting at with mine. There's things, there's threads that you intended, like, first drafts tend to be overwritten. And so, there's all these kind of subplots and, little ideas that, start here, blah, 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 that, don't end up necessarily making it, but, because of that, there's just like a tiny section of it that's hinted at, and it's like, well, just take that out because that's not supposed to focus on this. And yeah, I mean, I'm being sort of vague, obviously, about the script itself, simply because, it's not mine to share. But yeah, I just, if nothing else, I just enjoyed that sort of process of helping out a friend, and yeah, just reading others' work and seeing, not having a first-hand like seat to the table of like seeing the movie get made, but just being part of the process all the same, and from my little vantage point. So it's cool, because the same thing, Always Lola, his movie, I was there for the first table read, and I got to see some dailies, and then I got to see the first cut and the various revisions of the first edit and so forth. So it's really cool to, yeah, just, be a part of that, really, right? Speaking of kind of just development and so forth, my friends Courtney Stewart and Danielle Lefevre, they are developing this TV series. And as part of all getting it out there, they need like essentially a trailer for what the show would be. And so a couple weeks ago, we actually, went out and shot the necessary footage. And it's interesting because when you work on a trailer, like you're supposed to, right? Like this isn't something that's already made and then you're just taking clips out of that and making a trailer. Like you're having to go out and film these little snippets and make that trailer, which is interesting because instead of shooting scenes, you're just literally shooting tiny moments, and we're talking about 1 to 2 seconds, 3 seconds max, and so you got to select a single shot or just 2 shots per like little setup. So that's a lot of setups, right? Because you don't want to just have them be in like, let's say, a living room and get different shots. Like you want the world to feel expanded, especially since it's a TV show, not just the, movie. And so it's like you want to show all the possibilities. And to show those possibilities, you need a lot of locations, various people, and so forth. Wardrobe changes, so it's a lot. And so in the course of 2 days, we essentially shot so many different setups and all of it. And, each one of the setups, you want it to be as awesome as it can be, right? Where you have the right production design, where you have the right people and they're placed everywhere, and, the lighting and the composition and all that. So it was quite the undertaking, especially this was, LA's had unusual weather. Like it just constantly rains since December pretty much. And luckily, it rained like the night before, so the ground was wet. At parts during our filming, it was like misting, so it wasn't quite rain, but it wasn't dry either. And so, yeah, we had to sort of deal with that, and yet found a way to make it work. And that's the exciting part about it, is just kind of having it all come to fruition. Now they're in the editing phase, which, is still early rounds, and I want to be involved in. As I'm kind of highlighting here, it's been a lot. I haven't had the time, and so, they've kind of had to, pick out the select shots and takes that they liked, and we'll kind of build from there. But yeah, that's progressing well for them, so I'm excited that we just got it done, right? I mean, that was a lot to take in, and do, but yeah, we made it happen overall. So now let's see what it happens in the edit and go from there. Speaking of movies and trailers and things of that nature, some exciting news. Bogota trip, my second feature film, is playing another film festival. This is a virtual film festival. It's the Austin Liftoff Film Festival, so you can watch a Bogota trip that way. I will provide a link down below. So essentially, you pay for the festival, so you get the various movies that are there. So if you want to check those out, you're welcome to. But obviously, you can see a Bogota trip this way. It's basically for the next couple of weeks, I think 3 weeks total, and you also get to vote. So you have quite a bit of time to, check out the movie. It's about an hour and a half, roughly. And yeah, when you finish it, hopefully you will vote for it and all that. But yeah, it's another opportunity to see the movie, especially if you haven't yet seen it. How many more will be left? I'm not sure. We are working with the distributor to get it out there on platforms down the line. When exactly that will all be is a great big mystery to me as much as it is to you. It's just part of the process. So, if you're curious, it's not to say that you won't ever get a chance to see the movie, but, if you're someone who is curious, don't wait, because I don't know when the next opportunity will be. Switching gears towards writing in terms of book writing, I received another chapter in the Filmmaker How-To book from my ghostwriter. So we're on chapter 3 of 18. And so far, yeah, it's coming along well. There's definitely going to be a good amount of revisions, that I'm going to have to not fact check, but kind of make sure everything's, buttoned up in terms of all the nitty gritty details. I'm definitely involving my editor Emily Krempholtz to help fix the grammar and stuff like that, and simplify sentences and so forth. But overall, what I like about my ghostwriter's writing style is there's a romanticism and elegance to it all, right? Because we're essentially writing about my experience of making this movie, and this is for my first movie, which takes place in downtown Los Angeles and about people who are longing for love. And so, that style fits very well with the themes of what the movie is, right? And through this, we're trying to chronicle my journey and inspire and give, the lessons to other filmmakers. A big inspiration for me was always Robert Rodriguez's Rebel Without a Crew. And I'm not trying to mimic that book, but it certainly, that was a jumping off point. I'm going to do things a little bit differently. Like Rebel Without a Crew was purely, like his journal entries. Mine's, obviously much more retrospective in that way, and I'm going to stylize it where it has, breakout boxes and so forth with, hey, here's something that you can apply to yourself and stuff like that. And much like with Master Mental Fortitude, which is my first nonfiction book, my goal, I was thinking about it. I was like, okay, with Master Mental Fortitude, the way we formatted it was like, here's the lesson, which a lot of it, was tying in my experience as well as various examples. Then you had applying it to yourself, and then you had a creative exercise. So I think even with this one, at the end of each chapter, I will have like specifics of how all of this applies to you, and that's partly something that as I'm reading it, I'm like, I love where we're going with this book, but I want to make sure, that we just, at the end of the day, like, let's just solidify, here's the key takeaways and how they apply to you. So that's something that I jotted down for myself as we continue through this process. So yeah, slowly but surely, we are moving forward with that. So looking forward to the process and being able to, share the final result. It's going to be a little while, especially as an indie artist, any indie artist, that's just the nature of the game. Like, things just take longer because, as highlighted throughout all of this, these are all the side stuff that I'm doing, but the stuff that pays the bills, that's the primary stuff, and that takes precedent over any of it. The last sort of thing that I want to talk about creatively is, having sort of breakthroughs on my second novel called In Search of Sunrise. So this is the thing that I was talking about that was intended as a movie, and it just serves, for me right now, better as a book. And the reason for that is, there's just, I can really be as grand as I want about it, as ambitious as I want, because, the limit is just my imagination and what I can put to words, right? And the story itself deals a lot with artificial intelligence, and the biggest sort of thing that's kind of prevented me from really diving in, part of it is I've been focusing on the arbiters, but that's also a cop-out on my part, if I'm being honest, because, it just scared the crap out of me that a large chunk of what this, story is about is artificial intelligence and virtual reality. And, that's a big thing. How do you do it in a way that hasn't been done, right? So you're not derivative. What new things can you say? And also now that like AI is here, and it's changing constantly, how do you do it in such a way where you get at the principles of the matter versus just, writing something that, is essentially, here and gone tomorrow type of a thing, right? Where it no longer applies a year from now. That's not what I'm trying to write. With my writing, and obviously with any good stories in general, you want to write about the truth with a capital T, which is, like, even though, like, the more specific something is, the more universal it becomes, right? Like, that's the sort of weird dichotomy of storytelling. That's why, something can be set in the 1400s and yet still remain timeless because, it has those elements. And that's what I'm trying to get to. How I go about that, has been tough, right? This was something that I did have a co-writer on, Jason Squamata. And, when we finished up the script, we got it to a really good place. And, we've been working on it for quite a while. And he just, just life went in a different direction, especially during the, like, we were writing this during the pandemic, really, like, this was our pandemic project. And, life just, after a while, took us in different directions. And so he no longer could, once I decided to make it a book, could no longer continue with the project. And that's also part of it, I don't know, like, for me, mentally, I do miss working with Jason, because I don't know, we're such a great duo to come up with a lot of it. So that's kind of been another reason why it's been kind of slow and with this project, but I'm getting into it, and now I think I've found some breakthroughs where I'm going to go back to the original outline and kind of finesse things in a better way, and then go back and write. And the funny part is I'd gotten like 5 chapters done, and so that's about like 15,000 words, give or take, maybe slightly more, maybe like 18,000, I forget. But yeah, so not a lot of writing, but a good chunk of writing had been done. But I think I need to revisit that outline and strengthen it, and then get back into, like just seeing the macro of it all first before I get into the micro again. Especially since it's been quite a while since, I've thought about that beyond just like a passing thought here and there. So, and that's here's kind of something that's been interesting for me to reflect upon. In terms of my writing and my projects, as I revisit old stuff, obviously they're the best I could do at any moment. And I look at it, and I don't know, I'd be curious to see like what other artists, assign a percentage. But for me, like overall, like I'm 80% satisfied with the various things that I've done. Now, some of it's interesting, like even with my novel, let's say, sure, maybe if I like reopened everything and dedicated, the same mentality that I did when I wrote it, I'm sure I could, elevate it and get it to a place that's better. But still, I think it will only end up being like 90%. I don't think as artists we ever truly reach like 100% satisfaction with the work that we create, which is interesting to note. But yeah, I'm wondering, what would the percentages be for, self-assigned obviously, but what would those percentages be for people, because I'm even sure like the stuff we look at as masterpieces, right? Like The Matrix, let's say, one of the best movies regarded by many, many people. Obviously there are people who disagree, that's fine. But, in that same way, I wonder what the Wachowskis, like what's their satisfaction level with it? Because, even just this weekend, I took out the Art of the Matrix book. Like, and that's not the title of it, but it has artwork from the Matrix, and it has, the storyboard artists and the conceptual designers like Jeff Darrow and so forth, talking about the process, right? And, even just down to like, the Wachowskis originally wanted to shoot The Matrix in Chicago. Obviously they didn't, because they shot in Sydney. And they wanted to have other elements of it, but due to budgetary restrictions, they kind of pared down stuff. So, are they overall, like, would they say they're 80% satisfied? Obviously what they got is incredible, but, in terms of what they intended, what did they miss out on, right? So just kind of an interesting question to pose to oneself, I guess. Something show related, that I was thinking to myself, and I'm saying this because I'm open to suggestions, but I think, as I continue, and if there's ever future weeks that are truly, just hectic and so forth, I thought I might just, instead of doing lessons or vlogs or anything like that, just kind of do quick recommendations of books, movies, TV shows, podcasts that I think are worthwhile to check out, that I've benefited from, that I've enjoyed, whatever the case may be. That's just a simple way to keep putting stuff out there, and having it be of benefit, but something that isn't as time intensive as say this, for example, right? But I'm open to other suggestions. My goal is always to continue and be posting stuff. And it's not to say like, oh, I'm going to go on like months long hiatuses. No, that's not the case. But, certainly just historically, there have been weeks here and there where there's just other stuff going on, right? That I either take off completely or, just kind of, have been a little bit inconsistent. I might just put out like one or two, but like, what would be the alternative? I'm trying to think to still bring value. So let me know if you have suggestions. Would be open to that. Now, before I dive into like the AI stuff that I've been learning, I do want to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already, that we get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out, regardless of when I put them out. And also, if you truly appreciate what I do and think you might benefit from more direct interaction, well, that's what my Patreon page is for, patreon.com/Phil Svitek. It's $10 a month. It's the same price for everybody. Therefore, everyone gets the same thing. And, there's monthly coaching sessions as a group. I show behind the scenes stuff. I can, do questionnaires and stuff like that. So it's a more direct way for us to interact beyond just the comment section. So I would encourage you to take advantage of that if that is something that you're interested in. I would love to see you over there. All right, so let's talk about artificial intelligence and so forth. So, overall, there's so much constantly happening in the world, and it can be overwhelming in many ways. And I see a lot of people get bogged down by the opportunities, right? And there's a very good quote that I like to think about. Freedom isn't necessarily a choice; it's the ability to commit to a choice. That's not the exact quote. I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty much it. And so when it comes to, the tools for artists out there, indie creators, content creators, whatever you want to call them, there's a lot, right? And, for me, I try to be very deliberate with things of like, okay, let me dedicate time, as consistently as I can to just learning what is out there and just exploring and fiddling with stuff and seeing, okay, how can this apply to me? Or, what's just like, oh, this is cool, but it's not for me, and I can recommend to somebody else who's doing something along those lines, and they could therefore be someone who's learning that, and then if anything, if I ever need to utilize that, I'm learning from them, and then vice versa, right? So that's kind of how I like to approach a lot of this stuff. And if nothing else, I like to know what is out there, but I'm very deliberate with like, okay, what applies to me and what doesn't? Like that's always a big, big component. Or how can it apply to me? And some of the stuff, it's like, okay, there's stuff that I can see applying to me, but, like even with the arbiters, there's stuff that it definitely applies to me, and yet I'm not at that stage to utilize it. So it'll be down the line. But now at least I know about it, so that way I can have it, there for when I need it. It's in my brain space. But and so I think that's as good as I can to not overwhelm myself, because it is overwhelming. Like AI is changing constantly, so I want to learn about that. I want to learn about the Web3 space, The podcast space is changing, right? That's my bread and butter in terms of, how I make a living. Even just like, it's been interesting to track the evolution of newsletters, and, I'm probably like way late to the game, but like Substack, a lot of people that were doing traditional newsletters are now switching to Substack, and, it's interesting. Like many people that I know that have done that, they're like, wow, why haven't I done this sooner? That type of thing, right? So again, it's all about, what applies to you, and at the same time, don't berate yourself just because you're quote unquote late to the party. That's okay, better late than never, sort of a thing. But yeah, just keep learning, and part of it is have friends as well that you can share information with. In fact, just this past weekend, I managed to get, we've been planning this for a while, a good group of people together, that I had not seen each other in a while, and it was a good, connecting event. I don't like the word networking, so it was a connecting event where we all shared, what we were up to, where we could use some help and so forth. It was just great to be able to uplift each other, share resources, make some connections where people can be partners, or they can recommend people for whatever, just actually create meaningful interactions that move everyone forward in a meaningful way. So, I always try to be mindful of that. So that's kind of the bulk of what I've got going on. It's quite a lot, right? It's been a while since I've caught everybody up. There's a few things that I still have to share, but I think I'll save some of that for next week, because I think it'll be easier to, now that I've unloaded basically, I think, almost 4 weeks worth of stuff that you might have missed out on, it'll more easily fit in with that without making this episode, longer than it needs to be. So anyway, thank you for taking the time to tune in and hear what I've got going on, and just kind of catching up with me. Hopefully you've learned something. I hope to continue sharing more as I progress in all of this. As always, comment down below with any thoughts, opinions, questions, all that good stuff, and hopefully I'll see you next time.